Hey guys, this is Drew Brashler with DBB Audio. Today I'm wanting to do a video on the vintage reverb, which is a time-based effect with the X32. Now this is an emulation of the EMT250. Now the EMT250 was a vintage reverb that was released around 1976. Now, the cool thing about this thing is it actually sat on the floor. It was very large, and it was the first reverb to create ambiance completely in an electronic system. Now, the price on this bad boy was around $25,000, which inflation now would be about $100,000. So that's a lot of money for this reverb back then. So let's go ahead and just dive in and see what this thing's about. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hit the effects button, and we're just going to load it in on effects 1. Now we do that by rotating this knob until we get to vintage reverb here. We press set, and it's already currently on bus 13 in effects rack 1. So once we have that, we're going to press edit, and now we jump into the vintage reverb. So we can see that we have a lot of different adjustments here, and we have 2 layers. We have 1 and layer 2. Now let's go ahead and start with layer 1. Now the first button that we're going to see is front and rear. Now the difference between this is just a little bit of a variation on the sound of the effect. Basically, the original EMT250 had multiple inputs, and so depending on which input you were using, you would have a different sound. The main difference that I hear when I'm using this is just a little bit of difference of where the actual reverb occurs in the stereo spectrum. So go ahead and try different uses of this knob here. Now decay is going to be our time of the decay of the reverb at 1 kilohertz, and we have time from 0.4 seconds all the way up to 4.5 seconds, which is a long time. Now the next knob that we have is our red dots here. This is low multiply. Now low multiply controls the low frequency delay time at 300 hertz. So that's going to be the amount of decay in the low end. So if you wanted to have more low end in your reverb, you'd want to have this up higher. Now if this was at a 2x setting like this, it would double the amount of decay from our original setting here. Now high multiply is the same thing as low multiply, but this controls the decay time around 6 kilohertz. So this is going to be our high frequency information. So we can see that we have all the way up to 1 and all the way down to 0.25. So if we had this at 0.25, this would be 0.25 of this setting. So if we had this at 1 second, the high multiply would basically set our decay time on the high frequency down to 0.25 seconds or 250 milliseconds. The next one is modulate. Modulate is going to be very similar to a chorus sound. So you can basically vary the amount of chorus that's going to be in this. It's very, very subtle. So if you have it 100%, it's going to be in there. If you have this at 0%, it's not going to be active. Let's go ahead and jump into layer 2 here. And so layer 2 has the pre-delay. Now this is going to be the time between the original source and the effect sound. So we can vary the amount of time. So if we have a snare hitting, we can vary that amount of time for the reverb to appear in our sound. So we have the pre-delay adjustment from 0 all the way up to 120 milliseconds. So if I was wanting to get like a slap back reverb, like it's bouncing off of a cement wall, I'd want to raise this up higher into like the 90 to 100 milliseconds. If I was wanting to just have something pleasant sounding, I'd probably have it in the 10 to 30 milliseconds, usually sitting about 20 to 30 milliseconds. Low cut is going to be a low cut for the reverb. If you don't want to have your kick drum sound making that reverb sound very long, you can use this to cut out the information in the low end that you don't want. Same thing with the high cut. The high cut is going to cut out the high end that you don't want to have appearing for a long time in the reverb. This is going to be post the effect. And then we have our level knob. Now we can adjust our level from positive 12 all the way down to negative 12. So if you have your channel setting at a certain level and you just wanted a little bit more reverb coming through, you can use the level knob. The last thing that we have on this is vintage. Now the vintage is just going to emulate a little bit of the sound and the noise from the original effect. If you wanted to have a little bit more noise-free operation, I would turn vintage off. So let's go ahead and actually put some music into this and see what these different things do. Okay, so now that I have a little bit of music going through here, I'm just going to mute all the instruments except the drums, and that way we can really hear what this thing is doing. Now I have the drums going into my effects 1 and then into my vintage reverb here. Now I've go ahead and taken the delay, the pre-delay, the decay, the low cut, all of this stuff, and turned it completely off so we can really hear what this thing is actually doing. So our decay we'll hear here. Now, let's go ahead and turn this to about 2 seconds, so it's a pretty long decay. Let's go ahead and adjust the low multiply here. So you really just heard the low end started coming through a little bit more here. Now let's go ahead and move over to the high multiply, so we'll hear this in the cymbals. So you can create a lot of different sound using our decay, our low multiply, and our high multiply. If we were wanting this to sound like a really big arena, basically we can take this decay time and set it to something around like 1.8 seconds, and then really bring the low multiply and the high multiply up. Because in a big arena, there's going to be a lot of reverberation that's happening in all the frequencies. So we can go ahead and take this all the way up on both of them. And now we sound like we're in a very big arena. Now, if you were wanting to sound something more like a concert hall where there's a lot of carpet and seating and everything like that, that's going to be something where our high end is going to be a little bit more muffled. And then if you were wanting to make it sound like an acoustic treated room, you can bring the low multiply down and bring the high multiply up a little bit. Do some normal settings here. And we'll hear this happening here. So that's just going to sound like a pretty big room. Now if we want to, we can go ahead and bring the decays back down here, and let's go ahead and listen to the pre-delay. So we can really hear that snare. It goes pop-pop, pop-pop, versus 0. So another example of this is if we were wanting to make it sound like a very large room, we can set the pre-delay up to about 80 milliseconds, sorry, and then bring up the decay, bring in the low multiply here. So that now just made that room sound very, very large. Let's go ahead and bring in the modulate here. It's very subtle. So let's go ahead and bring in the low cut and show you guys that here. So I'm going to mute the overheads and just have the kick drum, the snare, and the toms coming through on this. Okay, and likewise, we can bring the high cut. And then lastly, we have our level here, which basically we can turn up and down our effect here. So if I was wanting to create a sound where it was going to be a little bit more pleasant of a sound for reverb, basically I would set the low cut here to about 70 hertz, and the high cut, would probably be about 14 kilohertz, just to give a little bit more vintage of a sound here. I would turn on vintage just for the effect. And then let's go back up to the first layer here. I probably have my decay setting about 1.5 seconds here. And my low multiply, I like a little bit more low end in my reverb and a little less high end. So this is probably where I would have my settings be here for just kind of a normal instrument reverb. And let's go ahead and check out the difference between front and rear. This is very subtle, so I'm not going to talk during this point. Now I've noticed a big difference in the high end with this. So the difference between the front and rear setting is it's going to just change where those reverberations are happening in the stereo spectrum. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial on the vintage reverb. This is such a great effect that I love to use. It's definitely one of my favorite reverbs on the board to be able to use. I use this a lot for vocal reverbs and instrument reverbs. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to post below. Also, make sure to check out the blog post that I have with this, as I have a little bit more detailed information than I just have in this video. And lastly, make sure you subscribe to my channel. You will see the most recent videos that I'm making on the X32. Thank you so much.